if an investment of our, what I would call our T, our time, energy, and attention is worth it, then it's worth it. And it's just making sure that the ways that we spend our time, energy, and our attention are on the things that are really worth it and not on things that are giving us false readings about what's important and what matters.
If I'm not establishing the worthy wins within my personal life and my business life, none of it matters. And to me, I think if you go pursue the worthy wins, both personally and professionally, that's when you actually win. And it's not separating the two.
All the things that happen in life are like these series of small little movements. And the point of taking the pause is to say, where am I at and where am I going? And is it headed towards that end goal that I've said is most important to me?
Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with your host, me, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I have my friend, John Olinger. He is an amazing author, speaker. He has a new book called Worthy Wins. If you're watching the video, you see it in the background. He spent 11 years at Nike working on such brands as Kobe, Jordan, Nike Running. He's become a friend over the last handful of years through the Maxwell community. Excited to have this conversation, but more impactfully, we're going to talk about wins. And one of the things that you write about in your book and kind of as I just described, you had, for many people, a dream job. You get to work at, Nike. You get to work with Kobe. You get to work with, the Jordan brand. Those things that if you're any kind of semblance towards sport, you're like, that's the dream job. But yet, how is having the dream job maybe not all what it's cracked up to be?
A dream job is a dream as long as that's the thing you're really going after. And what you find is sometimes your seasons of life change and the dream changes. And for me, as a kid who grew up in Oregon, not far from Nike, as a kid who loved sport, as a kid who was impacted by sport. And honestly, the reason why I wanted to work at Nike was because Nike told stories when I was a kid that made me believe I could be a better athlete, could achieve more than I actually thought I could do on my own. And I got so inspired by what they did. And so when I got older and it was like, how do I go and do that for other people? How do I have the chance to take the inspiration that was given to me? Because for me, I would say I outkicked my coverage in my sense of my basketball accomplishment. I'm 6 feet. I'm not super fast. I'm not super strong. But I had the amazing opportunity to get to play basketball in college. I played basketball overseas for 3 years. So I squeezed every last bit out of my potential. And I believe a lot of that was because I'd had this fire lit under me about who I could become and the way that sport could impact my life. And so I wanted to go to Nike and do the same thing.
So as you look back, and again, probably one of the pinnacle projects was celebrating the life of Kobe. And when you think about that as maybe one of your last wins corporately, how is that really a loss personally?
It's interesting in my life, Tyler, because there's this like connection in a lot of the things that I live even to this day where a loss has fueled a win. And I've been really fortunate to find ways to turn losses into wins. And with Kobe specifically, I was in this very unique position. I was one of the few people in Nike who had Kobe in their title. So I had a unique perspective there. I'd had the blessing of getting to spend time with him over the last couple of years I was in that role. And then, the accident happened, tragedy happened. And I think there's like a metaphor for life for me in the sense of like all the steps along the way, everything I've ever accomplished has been built upon preparation. And so that moment when the accident happened and I had to step in, my ability to be the steward of that project and figure out how to get us all on the same page and work us to move forward was built on the preparation. But unfortunately, it was founded upon a loss. And so I think when we experience losses, and I've had plenty in my life, both literal losses and metaphorical losses and all that, I think when we experience loss, we have a choice to make. We have a choice of whether or not we're going to let that loss define us. We have a choice to make whether or not we're going to let that loss keep us down. And for me, 2020 was a really hard year because my Kobe passes away at the start of the year. My dad passes away, and we can talk more about that. But my dad passes away at the end of that year. And all those things were really, really hard. But I think the whole point of our lives is not that the losses would hold us down or define us, but that they would actually be something that we can take and use as a springboard for good. And like personally, I believe like, hey, God, I don't know why that happened. I don't know why this hard thing happens in the world, but I do know that I have a chance to go use my life to take that hard thing and turn it into something that is a blessing and helps other people to live better lives and have better experiences.
You write about it in Worthy Wins about how, challenges in some ways redirect, define us, really give us opportunity. You just talked about that just now. There's a way to look at it that losses, like you said, they help us reflect and redefine where we're going to go, but they qualify what matters. Is that fair?
Oh, so fair. I think the thing that I knew, and I tried to find, I tried to find research on this because, I eventually sort of found it, but it's more felt rather than scientific. But when you have loss, especially when we're talking about like loss of life, it's this immediate clarifier of what's most important. And the reality is, you and I and everybody else in the world is just going about our lives. And one of my big hopes with Worthy Wins is that I can take some of that like clarifying elixir, so to speak, that you only experience when you have something really hard or tragic, or whether it's you getting close to death or somebody you love dying or getting close to death, that we could have some of that a little bit sooner to make sure that we don't have to wait until that thing happens, because it's going to happen. We're all going to draw near to death or die. We will die. We're all going to draw near to death, and the people around us are going to draw near to death. And I don't want to wait till the end of my life to start thinking about what matters most. I don't want to be sitting on my deathbed and saying, "Oh, well, I wished I would have done this." Like my dad's passing, Kobe's passing, all those things were these inspirations to say, "Hey, my time is running out, and how do I make sure that I use it to the absolute best of my ability?"
You saw it with people corporately at Nike. You've seen it since. In the Maxwell community, you've heard about it. I think John has written about it. It's like this idea of, you climb the corporate ladder, and there's a hope when you're at the very, very bottom, the first few rungs, that the ladder's leaning against the right building. And yet we see so often that people they start climbing and realizing, ooh, that's not the building I wanted to climb. And or they reassess, or they're just like, well, this is the one I'm going to have to. As you've seen that, as you've experienced it, as you write about it in Worthy Wins, to me, that really is the element of saying, what building am I put my ladder against? And what ladders do I have in life that I'm willing to climb? Like, take us through kind of that journey of yourself, being around others, and really trying to write this book to help both corporations and people make sure that they're climbing the right ladders, that they're going after the right wins.
Yeah, appreciate that. And John does say it well. It is about finding the right building with the right ladders. What I found, and what ultimately inspired me to write the book, was that at Nike, it was a matrixed organization. So basically meaning everybody felt like they had responsibility for a given topic. Like if you worked in basketball, you also had the person who worked in apparel in basketball and footwear in basketball and worked in China in basketball. Everybody had an opinion, and they all, thought that they owned the thing. So if we were talking about Kobe, everybody thought they had a thing to own. So and I'd seen that over my time at Nike. So we would go sit in these meetings, people with big titles and all the things, and we'd sit around the table, and everybody would have an opinion about what we're supposed to do. And a lot of times, the people with the biggest, craziest idea would win an argument, or they would sway people, or they would get them excited about their thing. But what I often saw was that these big, crazy, audacious ideas, sometimes they would have a huge impact, but a lot of times they would be a big spend or a big amount of time and energy and attention invested and not actually lead to anything tangible. And so if we then sort of like, if my moment with leading the work around Kobe's legacy was like, my big final exam in that way, it was all of that, but on steroids, because everybody at Nike cared. Everybody cared. Everybody wanted to do right by Kobe. Everybody wanted to tell a great story. And this had never happened before. Nike had never, the world hadn't really lost an icon like that, if ever, a long time. And Nike definitely had never had one of their lead athletes have that happen. And so how do you respond? What do we do? How do we do this dance? There's a lot of sensitivity, obviously. And, the reality is when that first happened, there were all these people with way bigger titles than me. They didn't have Kobe in the title, but they had VPs and, 3-letter acronyms and all the things that are having an opinion. But I was the only one who had been spending, from a brand marketing standpoint, I was the only one who had been listening and leaning in and paying attention and spending time with them over the last couple of years. And so it came to this point where it was like, okay, well, you want to do this thing and you want to do this thing. And hey, we got to figure out how to get everybody on the same page, because if we don't, it's not going to sound like a orchestra playing a beautiful symphony. It's going to sound like 15 different instruments playing their own tune. And so where we ultimately landed after about 8 weeks, maybe after
so there was 8 weeks of chewing through that.
There was some little stuff we did along the way that was done in small pockets and with less of the cooks in the kitchen. But then, it was all building towards, because there was already stuff that we had in the pipeline planned to do with him. And so that was really about 7 months after the accident. And so we were all building towards that thing that was already out there and figuring out, okay, well, what are we going to actually do now in that moment? And so where we ultimately landed is there was a single slide that we made, and it went in every single deck that went across the company about that moment, that week, what we were going to do. And the slide basically said, the objective of the work around Kobe's legacy is to pass Mamba mentality on to the next generation of athletes, starting with Gen Z girls. And that was it. Start there. And the reason why we chose that and why we ultimately got everybody to buy into that was because that's what Kobe had been spending his life on. He'd been spending his life investing in the next generation of athletes, specifically around Gen Z girls, his daughter and others, and helping them go. And so it was like, why would we do anything else than that's the legacy he wanted to pass on? And so what that slide meant was it went out to China, it went out to Europe, it went out to, the Philippines, it went out to all across North America, it went out to the cities, it went everywhere. And it just said, hey, do whatever you want as long as it passes Mamba mentality on to the next generation of athletes, starting with Gen Z girls. It didn't mean you couldn't have men or boys involved. It just meant we had to get really clear about who we were trying to reach and what we were trying to do with them. And so there was some amazing creative work that was done all across the world as a result of that. But they just had to play in this lane, because if it wasn't in that lane of Mamba mentality, it's out.
I'm excited to talk about this because hopefully you can shine some light, and probably closer than anyone else. And to this point of what you just said, Kobe was invested in. And I think, as I look from the outside, not a huge Kobe fan, it is what it is, right? Was never, but I appreciated him more the last couple years of his life than I did as a player. And I think it and again, comes to this idea of wins. Because I really comprehend, maybe you haven't thought about this, maybe you have thought about it and distilled it, is what he qualified as a win as a player was dramatically different what he was working on, focusing on wins, like you just talked about, his daughter, his legacy beyond him. And there's almost this perception of me from the outside of he realized, wow, I went about winning the wrong way as a player. It may have worked. It helped fill this just perception. Man, what I'm focusing on winning now, and there was almost, you hear him talk at times, if I would have been more focused on winning that way, I would have won way more as a player. What do you, as you sat there, as you've thought about, thinking about it now, is there some truth in that, or is it like, nah, not really?
I think it's actually like a good representation of what we were talking about from the corporate side also. Because if you'd asked Kobe in whatever, 2010, 2012, what was most important to him, he probably would have said, I want to become the greatest player on the planet. And that was his point in time where he was, that was the ladder he was climbing on that building. And, a lot of the stuff that goes on, the reality is to be great at anything, you're going to have to sacrifice other things. And so he was maniacal, but he also he would go work out at 4. And the reason he's famous for working out at 4 a.m. is so he could go home and take his kids to school, And so he represented a good counterbalance there. Obviously he was crazy about his training and preparation, all that stuff, but he was trying to do what he could to make sure he was investing in the places that mattered to him, his family. I think the part where it gets really, really interesting as he gets older and moves on is he realized, okay, well, I'm not going any higher on this mountain of basketball. And so then what's really important to me? What do I want to spend my life on? And he could have said, hey, I'm going to go train guys. I'm going to go train the best players in the NBA. He said, I'm going to go train my daughter. I'm going to coach my daughter. I'm going to help her. I'm going to help other girls. I'm going to invest there. And, same thing for me. Honestly, I've never shared this publicly, and it's nothing super private, but I grew up a Blazers fan. So you couldn't be a Lakers fan. You couldn't be a Kobe fan. So when I got into this role, and that's a whole different conversation of how I ended up in this job.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I'm going into the job as a Kobe fanboy. Oh my gosh, I get it's yeah, Kobe's a legend, all that stuff. But I was a Blazers fan. So I'm sort of
all right, I guess I'll do my job.
A lot of dreams for me in the late 90s and early 2000s, from a Blazers standpoint. So, yeah. But he really won me over, Tyler, because of the way that he was so committed to that investment in his family and in girls basketball and his daughters. We would go down and try to meet with him at his office in Costa Mesa, and it'd be like, okay, well, there's a 2:00 hard stop. Why? Well, I got to go pick up the girls from school. And so it was he had done the investment, he had climbed the ladder, so to speak, and then he came to that moment of, hey, I could spend my life on anything or nothing or do nothing. I don't have to do any of this. But he had said hey, this is what I really want to do, and I'm going to do it. And for me, that was the big takeaway, and why I came to respect his approach to that so much was because he just said, hey, this is my intention, and here's the actions that I'm going to take. And what I call those is active intentions, set your intention and then make consistent actions. And that is Mamba mentality. Mamba mentality is this journey to become the best version of yourself, but it's built upon day by day by day by day, investing in that thing. He would tell you, there's no way to shortcut the journey to the top of the mountain.
I sit here and talking to you, and again, we haven't talked about this. We've talked about other things in our personal time before, but I think it is, man, I can't sit here and know that you wrote this book that is so valuable about what really matters in life and chasing the worthy wins within organizations or personally, and not take a little bit from that example of someone that, all right, you were on this pursuit to be better than Jordan. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen, right? But then as you evaluated life, you realized, yeah, well, that's done. Or maybe that doesn't even really matter because the father that I am really matters more. That's what I gather. What you just said, he gave by example. I think he lived that out publicly. And to me, that's why I've said this to people. I said to somebody a couple weeks ago, the world saw a glimpse of the best version of Kobe. Yeah. That's my belief.
Yeah. It felt like it was heating up in a good way. That was going to encourage and help a lot of people. And it makes it that much more of a tragedy.
Yeah. But I think in that is you're a benefactor of having that experience and to be able to write what you've written from the perspective of gathering a little glimpse of it where it's, hey, that's what impactful. If you stop and think about the tragedies that you've gone through, your parents, to other things, like, hey, there's a little piece of each of that lives on beyond it. Like my brother who died when I was 14, he was 3. Why am I doing this work today? Because his life has purpose, and it's how I had to work through that. And so to me, it's really, we come back to this point of the losses in life, the tragedies, the challenges in life really does explain to you what really matters. What's worthy to pursue to win.
Yeah. And the thing that I think why I'm so passionate about it. And it is this, like, worthy wins apply to organizations and they apply to individuals. And the two elements of it are still the same. They're impacted in different ways. But ultimately, like, the world tells us, right, it's all about what we accomplish. But the data and the experience tells us that that is the relationships that we cultivate, are what really have the greatest impact on our lives. And so for me, worthy wins are this combination of who plus what. So they're relationships plus accomplishments. And we have to do things in our life. We have to go after things. And it doesn't mean, like, worthy wins don't mean that, hey, you completely abandon accomplishment or going after things. Like, it just makes sure, like, the big aim, right, is that we would get to the end of our lives and not have overinvested in accomplishments and underinvested in relationships.
Well, that's exactly when, you and I were just chatting before we hit record. And I asked, what can I do to best serve? And you talked about the corporate compared to the personal. I said, well, I have a take on that. And my take is what you just said, is there is no difference. If you chase it in the right way, it benefits both the company and the person. And I think what happened for a generation of people is we had this jump from the boomers to Gen X, and it was all about accomplishment. And almost what was lost was the family side of it. And now, as going through COVID, like you experienced and so many others, realize, ooh, dude, that could all be gone tomorrow, even yet today. And so if I'm not establishing the worthy wins within my personal life and my business life, none of it matters. And to me, that you come back to it, it's like, I think if you go pursue it, the worthy wins, both personally and professionally, that's when you actually win. And it's not, separating the two. That's my opinion. And you don't write it in that way, but to me, that's where it is. If you're doing the right by the person and the company, everyone wins.
Yeah, totally. And the best companies do, right? Best organizations make sure that that's the case and that the people that work for them matter. And I think in our lives, the reason why it's so hard, scientifically, it's hard because basically accomplishments do things to our brain and our bodies and create effects that are really measurable. Like you achieve this thing, you do this accomplishment, do this. Like, relationships, while you can get those feelings and those things to your body, it just doesn't have the same measure. It can't be measured in exactly the same way. And so it's way easier, and we're wired to chase things that are easier. Like, there's a reason why we do things that we don't want to do. It's because they're easier to do. The things that are most valuable are difficult to do. And we're having to fight against those things. And so the whole point of saying, like, hey, what really matters to me is the starting point of saying, hey, what am I going to invest my life into? Like my friend John Gordon, who wrote the foreword to my book, when I first was explaining the concept of worthy wins to him, he was sitting there thinking about it. And then he goes, if it's worth it, it's worthy. And the reality is, if an investment of what I would call our time, energy, and attention is worth it, then it's worthy. And it's just making sure that the ways that we spend our time, energy, and our attention are on the things that are really worth it, and not on things that are giving us false readings about what's important and what matters. And we have so many things coming at us every day, right? About significance, like we're being deceived by what's happening on the internet and social media and prominence and all this stuff. And ultimately, like, that's not what really matters. Like, it's great. I want to impact people. I want to encourage people. I want to help people. But if I miss with the relationships that matter most to me, that's a loss, man. And I don't want to get to the end of my life and have lost with the people that mattered most to me.
So for those that are listening in that are, you know, in the same boat where you are now, you know, you're starting a new business, you're writing a book, you've left Nike, you're on this challenge pursuit, your boys are young, talking to that person or the person that you were, you know, just a couple years ago, as you were analyzing, oh, what do I do? You know, you moved to Florida, you left Oregon, you left the confines of the Beaverton complex, and like really weighing through the decision you made, but what you just said as far as what is worth my time, energy, and attention. Like, how did you manage that tension looking back? And again, as you write about it, Worthy Wins, how do you suggest for people to really measure that tension and analyze it and create a plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, and Bob Buford says it really well in Halftime, like, this isn't about quitting your job, but you might not. And for me, I didn't go into what happened at Nike and say, hey, I need to quit my job. What happened was we got to the end, actually about a year and a half before the Kobe project came to the end. I had led another big project, and the project was great, but I was deep in it, man. It was a year and a half of just really deep work, grind. Got to the end. It was awesome. Everybody was happy. And then I walked into my boss's office the next week, and he's like, okay, what do you want to do now? What do you want to work on? And I was like, I have no idea. I haven't thought about it. I've been so deep in the weeds of this project. I have no idea what I want to do next. So I said, give me a week. And so I went away, processed, prayed, came back the next week, and I was like, hey, I want my next role to be one where I get to focus on people and not on projects. Because the part of my journey at Nike was I had to learn everything myself. And that's sort of what Nike culture is like you just get thrown in the deep end of the pool and you either figure out how to swim or you don't, and you aren't there very long. Like, that's just the reality of the culture. But does that mean that's right? Like, is that the way it should be? And what I wanted so badly was to take what I had learned about how to be successful at Nike and be able to invest that in the next generation of people that were coming up through the ranks, so they didn't have to have all the painful losses that I did and all the wasted time and trying to, like, what if somebody actually taught them how to swim rather than just expecting they could figure it out on their own? And so I told my boss that, and the way all organizations are, right? It's just change is slow. And so he's like, great, gotcha. Yeah, we'll look for that. And organization's churning. Then 2020 happens, Kobe's accident, COVID, Nike reorgs, or they say we're going to reorg, which, as we all know, means, hey, people are going to lose their job. And so it's like, okay, what's going to happen? And so without going deep in the story, y'all can read about it in the book. But basically, I get to this point in the journey where Nike says, hey, great job on the Kobe work. We have a new job for you. And the job they gave me was a great job. It was a job that people would love to have. It was to be the global brand director for men's running. Awesome job. People would kill for it. But it was a project job, not a people job. And so, but this was one of those things where they say, here's your job. Would you like the job? Or would you like to be unemployed? It wasn't a, hey, you can pick a different item on the menu. It was, this is it. And so I accepted the job, but that was the point in time. And I said, hey, when can I have a people job? When can I take, because I felt like my best contribution, both for me personally and for the organization, was for me to be in a people job, even though I was really great at leading big projects. And
probably because you were good at leading people. I mean, just,
yeah, thank you.
I mean,
I'll receive it. And they were like, we don't know. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years, hard to say. And I'd had people jobs before. And so it was more, the org was getting flattened. It was just tough. Like, again, in the midst of a reorg, I got a great job.
And I want to, like, I know where you're going along this path, and you'll remember this path because you lived it, but I want to interject in, like, kind of this idea of sink or swim mentality, right? And a lot of organizations work that way. And as you've said, and I think what happened, what probably separated you, made you great at being project, is you didn't let people drown, right? And that's the problem with sink or swim is you can survive, but oftentimes the people that survive don't know how, and there's a lot of others that drown. And that's something I've talked about before. I realize, and it really comes down to being a great swim coach. And to me, being a leader is being a great swim coach, but also what I hear in you, what you were really wrestling with is the win of, man, look at this amazing project. No longer mattered because you wanted to look and get the win of, look what all these people accomplished. That's what I hear from you.
Yeah. And I think I care about people. It was like, that was the redefining for me of what did I want to spend my life on? And to be fair, like big project jobs are the jobs that get you promoted at Nike. So they're the jobs that people look at and say, hey, that person's great to move on to the next big project job and, get more prominence, more money, more, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, it was just like, I had young kids. I had those big projects take a lot from you, and they'll take as much as you give them. And so I didn't want to see more people drowned, and I didn't want to drown. And because I was clear on that matter, it didn't mean I didn't screw up along the way. Like there's plenty of times where I was trying to win and lost. Plenty of times I neglected my family like I wish I wouldn't have. Ways I hurt my wife because I prioritized work over her. Like those things happened, and I was like, that's not what I want my life to add up to. And that was before the stuff with Kobe or my dad or anything else.
Yeah.
And so like you come to that point of, okay, well, if it's not about quitting your job, then I'm not telling everybody who's in a project job they need to quit. But it is about being really clear about what you want to accomplish and who are the people that matter most to you. And just making sure in the midst of whatever it is that you're going after that you're not leaving them behind. And for me, tangibly, what that looks like, it looked different at Nike than it does now, but like, it's those consistent actions that I talked about that are so important. Like Kobe modeled it in a way. And for me, that was what I realized was so important. If I can just take the small, consistent actions, so I'll give you like a tangible one. Like if at the end of my life, I want to be connected to my wife. Like if that's what I long for, is for us to be connected as teammates doing life together the whole way, then I have to find ways to create connection. And what we realize, right? Young kids, all the stuff, like disconnection is like the reality, right? Like that's the reality. We're constantly being pulled apart. So how do we create intentional connection? We create intentional connection by intentionally planning time, right? And so that started when we moved to Florida. We had help. Her mom was willing to babysit one night a week. And so we had a date night, and date night was awesome, right? Especially coming from Oregon and COVID and 3 kids under 5, where we weren't, there was no dates. It was just surviving.
Yeah.
And so then we get to Florida.
It was like Swiss Family Robinson. Like we're all on one.
Yeah. we're all just making it, man. Yeah. And we're tired, but like lots to be grateful for. So we get to Florida, start going on dates, and the dates are fine, but they start turning into dumps. They're the calendar dumps, they're the kid dumps, they're the life, like they're not dates. And so eventually my wife is like, hey, I'm not really enjoying these dates. Okay, well, that's a problem because these are supposed to be good. These are supposed to be
do you want to date somebody else? Like,
yeah.
I mean, what's going on here? Like, are you breaking it to me in a strange way? All right.
Yeah. So, but that was a really pivotal point because it made us realize we had to change something. We had to find ways for more connection points because us dumping those things was important. We needed to connect on all those things, but we had to find ways to do it. So now we have a date night, but the date night is not the night we're talking about the calendar or the schedule or the kids or anything. We're actually having a date and getting to just enjoy each other. So that's great. We added a weekly planning meeting into our life that is just meant to be a time where we do connect on all those loose ends, and it gives us a chance to plan. But then we added a third touch point in during the week, and we call it Wine Wednesdays. And Wine Wednesdays, we don't even drink wine most Wednesdays. Sometimes we do, but most times we don't. But Wine Wednesdays exists on our calendar as a block from 8 p.m. onwards on Wednesday nights as a hey, we're not going to schedule anything else. And on those nights, even if we have stuff to do or work or whatever, that's the night we're not doing it. We're just creating that space to be together. Sometimes that means watching a show. Sometimes that's having a deep talk. Sometimes that's just sitting and being on the couch and chilling together. Like, it depends. But if you think about it, we went from one intentional touch point a week to 3, which means you go from 52 to 156. And you go, in 10 years, you go from 520 to 1,560. Do the math for a second. But you go and think about, that's 1,000 in over 10 years. That's 1,000 more intentional times of connecting.
Here's where I take from that, and that's a great description of with a spouse, a partner. But man, how many times do our work relationships, it's all a quick meeting, agenda meeting. It's like the date night where it's just, let's ramble off what's happening this week. And in our work relationships, which I think are just as important, to say, hey, dude, tell me about what's going on with your boys, John. What's Jude up to? Like, those things that need to be said in a work environment, because they're just as important there as they are personal. And again, that's where I think our world is challenged in a lot of ways. But it also is, this stuff that you've written about and this stuff that you're exposing, of saying, hey, yes, this matters tremendously. But guess what? It does over here too. And we can't, if we're too focused on accomplishing a scoreboard of sprinting to the ticker, who's sprinting to the tape, and we're not worried about, who's passing the baton to us and are they in good shape, then we're never going to get there.
Yeah. And it's so hard, right? Because we have so many things that we're trying to accomplish. And I don't miss corporate for all the meetings that have to happen. At Nike, you're just bouncing from meeting to meeting, and it's so hard. But the best bosses I had at Nike were the ones who were able to just come into their office, close the door, and take a deep breath and say, how are you doing? What do you need? How I can help you? How are things going? And
they were swim coaches.
Yeah, the swim coaches. Absolutely, man. And I think we're all longing for somebody to help us swim better. And in this life, right? We can't see our stroke. We can't see if our stroke is broken. And so we need people to help us correct us on that way. And I think ultimately, like, if you think about it from that analogy, we're way down the path here, but like,
it's great. Keep running. I'm thinking of Finding Nemo in my head. So, just keep swimming. So you can just roll with it. It's great.
Swim coaches thrive when their swimmers succeed.
Yeah.
And the reality is, people at work who are struggling at home and are struggling as parents or in a relationship or anything else, to think that there's a separation that comes and that they can perform at the office, like, it's not realistic, and they need people to listen to them and be with them.
I think it happens 2 ways, right? You have the person who, in their personal life, it's an absolute train wreck, and they are just absolutely sold out. They are the player that is there at 4 a.m. into the office. They're, not leaving till 10 o'clock because they want to avoid the personal. And so they are just oh my goodness, they are over the top, right? And like, look at the dedication. And their personal life is a train wreck. They're trying to run from it. Or there's the person whose personal life is a train wreck, and then that spills over into their professional, where they don't have focus. There's like, everything's a destruction. I'm thinking of Antonio Brown. I'm thinking of like all these professional athletes that, their personal life is just such a mess that it spills over into everything. And like, I'm sitting here and saying both of them leave a lot to be desired. You can applaud the person who is like, well, unfortunately, at some point, it's going to not end well, right? You write about the balance, counterbalance. Is like, if you're not ebbing and flowing, like walking is, that's what they say, walking isn't balance. It's just, kind of what is it? Structured, falling. And it's the same idea. Like, if you're not balancing those, if you're not looking at saying, all right, how are we working with this? Dude, it's going to be just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think, as you write about, we've talked about here, is the great challenge for all of us is to say, do we need the losses to smack us upside the head to recount what really is a win? Or do we take the opportunity to say, yeah, losses are going to come, that's fine. Let me really make sure that I know what is a win on the scoreboard.
That's the hope, man. And what I've found in all those things, right? It's the same in an organization and same in our personal lives. If we can just pause for a moment, it feels so hard to stop and just take the moment. And the Kobe example gives you that, right? Everybody wanted to do stuff for Kobe. I've had clients I work with who are just like, hey, I don't have time to stop and do that. Like, we got to go. And in the same way, in my personal life, like, hey, I got things to do. I got work to do. I got a lot of work. I got a lot of work to do this summer. Like, that's the truth. And the reality is, I need to pause before the summer starts and do this simple exercise and say, hey, who are the relationships that matter most to me? And I know who those are. What do I want to be true about them at the end of the summer? And what are the small little consistent actions that will help me get there? So, like, one example, you take that and say, for me, it's like, last summer, we live a mile away from the beach. Last summer, we definitely went to the beach less than 5 times.
That's right.
With
little boys, I mean, I'm not a beach guy, so it's all right. I get it. Your boys, like, they want to go beyond the beach.
Yes. But my point being, the beach or anything else, the reality was, the reason why we didn't go to the beach more was because I worked a lot. And so by taking this moment to pause before the summer started and say, hey, what do I want to be true in my own life, with my wife, with my kids, and my work? I realized, hey, we missed last summer. We missed. So how do we change that and make a little simple change? It was saying, hey, if I want to have more meaningful memories with my boys, then I need to take an action. The action I'm choosing to take is saying, hey, I'm not going to work on Friday afternoons in the summer.
Yeah.
And it's those little pauses. If I don't pause, man, I'm just going to keep doing what I do. We're all just doing. We're all just going. We're deep in the work. We got things to do and people to see and work to accomplish. And if I had just one thing for anybody, businesses or individuals, just take the pause to say, what am I really trying to accomplish? And what are the small little steps I can take right now without blowing up my life or my organization or my job that would help lead me to that place to accomplish that thing?
It reminds me of the Abraham Lincoln, right? You give me an axe to chop down a tree, or maybe it's George Washington, one of the two, right? It's one of those presidents. I think it's Abe Lincoln. Give me an axe, chop down a tree, give me 6 hours to do it, and I'm going to sharpen it for 4 or 5 hours, right? And it's that, man, the preparation in the front end, the setting your GPS before you ever start driving down the road, to go make a cross-country trip is going to benefit you tremendously. Here's something I was wondering. I did it a couple years ago. I read a book by Antonio Garrido about journaling, my life journal. Mm-hmm. And he makes the suggestion of writing an obituary. I don't know if you've ever done this. Have you done it?
I have, yeah.
And to this point, what's really amazing there is that is the GPS destination point. Then you can start to say, ooh, okay, what road am I driving on now? I almost think you could do the same corporately, right? If you say, for example, the first day at Nike, right? And they sit you down and say, John, all right, when you're done at Nike, whatever that may be, that could be 2 days from now, that could be 25 years from now. What do you want your corporate obituary to be? And I think about that corporately as much as personally, like, man, how impactful can that be not only for a leader, but also for you saying, oh, am I going down? Am I doing the things to get there? Or did I get sidetracked because that seemed like just in a moment, oh yeah, that seems enticing.
Yeah. And the thing about obituaries, the ones that are really moving, right, are not the ones that are bullet points of all the things that you accomplished, right? The obituaries that are moving and meaningful are the ones that are filled with relationships, and they're about the ways that you treated people, and they're about the ways that you invested in people and how you made other people better. And so that's why the exercise is so important, because it just reframes that it's not just about what. But like for me personally, I'd way rather my obituary read about all the ways I invested and helped people. And oh yeah, at the bottom, maybe there's like, hey, and he worked at Nike for 10 years and he wrote a book and all these things. But if there's not a bunch of stuff about the ways I impacted people, then it's a miss. And so yeah, that is the ultimate GPS. And then we work back from there. And so that's like that simple thing of like thinking about one word that I want to be true about my relationship with my wife. Like nobody, and again, nobody gets in a marriage or has kids so they can be a bad spouse or they can be a bad parent. Nobody wants that. Nobody ends up homeless because they said they grew up saying I want to be homeless. Like all the things that happen in life are like these series of small little movements. And the point of taking the pause is to say, where am I at and where am I going? And is it headed towards that end goal that I've said is most important to me?
Man, I think that's a great thing for everyone watching and listening is like, where am I at and where am I heading? And just write it down. Like take a snapshot of that, because I think that is impactful for all of us. John, as we wrap up, one final question. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they buy the book? Where can they do all of that stuff?
Yeah, appreciate it, man. The book's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places. Just search Worthy Wins, WORTHYWINS. You'll find it on there. And then you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and my website, john-olinger.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everyone watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to get notified whenever we drop new content. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever that may be, if you could rate and review this episode, it will help more people find impactful leaders like John. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.